I'm going to, as quickly as possible, go through 6 categories regarding marketing and PR. We'll do a brief overview about what the heck those things are, because that's always hard to explain and kind of wrap your head around. And then within those 6 categories, we'll talk about the tools that you have at your disposal. We'll define those tools a little bit, and then also talk about some best practices for those tools. So that's kind of the formula going through. It's going to be a lot of multitasking. Okay. All right, so here's our overview. We'll do the marketing PR overview. We'll talk about social media briefly and overarching. We'll do public media and relations, photography and video, events, festivals, cost, budget, and hiring. So what is marketing? Marketing is the activity, set of institutions, and processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. I think the big takeaway there is that it's an active process, and it should be creating value. So if you can always come back to asking yourself, what are the things that you can do that provide people with value, whether that's creating a high quality of beer or giving media great articles to write, how can you be creating values for people? What does marketing mean for beer? First and foremost, it's selling your product. As much as I like to romanticize what it is that we do in marketing and PR for beer, we are making goods and we're manufacturers of goods. So in order to do the rest of the fun marketing stuff like telling your story and doing events, you have to first and foremost sell your product. Providing value, obviously, we just talked about that, and then telling your story. We're in a unique position in the beer industry wherein the more that we tell our story and dive in, people connect to that and they grab onto that, and that actually helps us sell our products, which is fantastic. So then what is PR or public relations? Public relations is the activity of providing the public, specifically individuals and media, with information about your organization so that people have a positive idea of the organization's work. This is the thing that you control. What it means for beer is that you can relate news and information about your brewery events, beers, and company values to media outlets and individuals. And this is the part of the story that you control. You're able to actually posit the way that you connect to the world and what you're doing and put that in whatever light you'd like to. So it's a super important thing that we get to do and need to do. We'll launch into social media. Your tools here, your 3 big tools are going to be Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we'll talk about briefly, we'll just focus on those 3 and we'll talk about the voices and the purposes of each. There are sub-accounts such as YouTube, Pinterest, Vimeo, and Snapchat. I've seen various breweries have like different levels of success with these. I would say that if you're gonna choose something to dive into, YouTube and Vimeo are great places to host your video work if you're able to do that. And then you can connect back to your website, you can post longer format things and Instagram will let you. So they do have value, but you're probably not gonna spend a ton of time using those. So Twitter is more about moments in time. It's current news that can be disseminated in short, concise posts. I think the voice of Twitter is really fun. I think you have to be careful with it because, in being quippy and witty, you can, definitely wade into some tricky waters, but it is great for like in the moment news. Facebook is obviously a multifaceted program where a lot of information can live. You can post longer format videos, Facebook events, all allow you to take a deeper dive into what your brewery is doing. And then even like generationally, the people who spend time on Facebook are willing to dive a little deeper and read into your brand. So that about you on Facebook is really important, and updating that information is important, even if it doesn't seem like it is, or even if you don't spend a ton of time on Facebook. Most people use Facebook, I think, more than websites to get information. So keeping that up to date is super important. Instagram is a visual platform that's best suited for storytelling, brand building, and connectivity. It's a great place to show, obviously visually, what you're all about, to invest in photography, to have little statements about who you are and what you're about. And it shouldn't be obviously underused or underrated. Let's see. So best practices for social media. Some of these may seem obvious, but I still see these things happen all the time, so it never hurts to hear good best practices again and again. And these are, again, overarching broad strokes. We could talk about algorithms, post-frequency metrics, and boosts, but honestly, like, there's no right answer or magic formula that's general enough for everyone in this room. So if you think about those things more as like SOPs for your specific marketing and branding, that's going to be more helpful. Like if you have an event that needs a boost, you can kind of set those precedents within your brewery. So it doesn't really do much good for me to talk about that kind of stuff because you're going to see different results than I would for one of my clients. So the first one is decide how you want to use your platform. Social media is a powerful, powerful tool. It is, it's social, it's political, it's religious. It's kind of a scary place right now. Decide how your brand should, if your brand should wade into those waters, and if you do that, be aware that it affects your employees. I know a lot of people who feel like they have a voice and they have a responsibility as a brewery who has people's attention to kind of wade into those waters, and that's going to be your decision, but realize that like a post that you make on social media, your bartender is going to have to also like defend and talk about, and they're front line. So just be aware of those things. And if it is something you do decide to do, frame your opinions from a positive opinion. Telling the world who you are should inherently tell them who you are not. So you don't need to spend time on the negative and necessarily, talking about things that you're not. Talk about who you are, and that's a much more positive way to frame your beliefs and what you're about as a brewery, if you choose to do that. Tell your story again and again and again. There's always a new audience. There's always somebody coming to your brewery who doesn't know who you are, who doesn't know what you're about. And it's not enough to tell your story in the very beginning and expect people to just go that far back and find out who you are. Like, be proactive about giving that to people and telling them what you're about. And your story is multifaceted. It evolves, and it's rich with details that, believe it or not, people want to know about. It may seem boring or obvious to you, but people are keen to know those things, and it connects them stronger to you as a brand. Your story is bigger than you, and I see this a lot, but we and are stronger pronouns than I. You're running a social media network for a brand, not yourself, and there's a lot of people who you're representing a larger vision, a team of humans, and even to some degree the surrounding community and town and city, so lean into those resources. Those people have invested deeply in your dream, and their buy-in is strong in telling their stories and asking them questions and featuring them and making it seem like you are the team that you are. It's much stronger, and it will make your brand a lot stronger. Don't feed into negativity, or as a friend of mine calls it, don't feed the animals. Negativity is not controllable, but you can always control your reaction and response to it. And I highly recommend that your reaction be kind, educational, and not public. Take the conversation out of the public forum and pursue direct interactions and relationships. If it's a complaint or a concern that you feel does warrant your attention, direct message that person, take that out of the public view. We all react differently one-on-one than we do when everyone's watching. And when you do that, be aware that that conversation can still be posted for the public. So be kind, be educational, be blameless in your interactions with people on social media. Reinforce positive interactions, paying attention, liking, commenting, the positive feedback encourages more of it. You can train your consumers that positivity gets your attention and negativity does not. So engage with the positive and ignore the negative, or directly address it, but take that away from the public eye. And you can, again, like cultivate a culture on your social media that reinforces positivity. So going into public media relations, your tools are right here. We'll just keep flying through. Press releases, we're going to spend a minute on this because it is a formal third-person objective piece of writing that's created for the purpose of announcing and disseminating something ostensibly newsworthy, and those are going to be your two keywords right there. And they're seldom necessary throughout the course of a brand's life. Things that are, we'll give you some examples, not press release worthy. Most beer releases, if it's on draft or in Crowler, don't write a press release about it. Taproom events, collaborations, new merchandise, none of those things are newsworthy or things that a media outlet would talk about unless they're like earth-shattering somehow. Things that are press release worthy are expansions, distribution in new markets, large annual festivals that you host. So I think another good way to think about that is I lost it. There's 8,000 craft breweries in the country, so let's assume that everybody is on their game, sending email newsletters and press releases to media. Think about what's going to cut through all of those and what's newsworthy and what you would want to read about and frame, and then decide if you need to write a press release and do the full thing. There is a press release structure. It's set in stone formula. This is a graphic of that. You guys will receive this, so we're not going to go through it. You can also Google press release templates, and it's a style of writing. It's a way to do it. Think back to your college days when you're writing papers. It's literally set in stone, and if you follow that, you'll get a lot more attention and play for media, because they also need things that they can take and immediately print, because it happens so fast. So take some time to look at that when you guys receive it. Email newsletters. This is longer format storytelling, beer education events, etc. You should have 2 lists. You should have one for consumers and then one for media outlets. Obviously, like, media doesn't need to know what beers are on tap that week, or if you have trivia night. It's just not things that they're going to promote or have time to pay attention to. So keep your 2 email separate. And email click-through rates are actually at an all-time high. So I know it seems a little old school, but it is worth your time. Promise. Media emails, craft brief informative emails or newsletters. You should include graphics and photos that are ready for media use, whether that's a Dropbox link or photos that are attachments and not embedded in the emails. Saves them a lot of time, and it also just makes you look polished and professional. Reach out periodically with more than one piece of news. It's important to not just keep peppering media and hit them up every time you have new news. Give a month overview, give a quarter overview of the things that you have coming up, and then from there they can decide what they want to follow up on. If you have a beer that you're coming out with that fits an article they have, but give them a long view and give them something more to look at than just single events all the time. Event listings, take advantage of local and national when appropriate event listings. Free listings are great for weekly and smaller events. Brewbound actually has a fantastic one where you can just go on yourself. You can add those weekly tappings of a new beer, trivia nights, what have you. Use those to your advantage. There's a ton that are available probably locally to you, and just do a little research and find where those are. And I would say consider paid listings for ticketed or larger annual events, things that you really need to have people take an action on or move. So best practices here are communicate with consumers regularly and consistently. Depending on your volume of content, send out weekly or monthly communications on the same day of the week if possible, every time. For as much as the beer world is changing and people want variety, they also crave consistency in communication. It's a worthwhile work that encourages your consumer base to stay tuned in and lets them, again, know who you are. You're going to want to be a dependable and credible news source. Make your interactions and communications with media count. This goes back to just not peppering media with a bunch of individual pieces of news. Also send well-crafted, professional, poignant, and accurate emails and press releases that respect the time and full inboxes of media outlets. Take the time to organize, prepare, and send out information. Be proactive, take time, and know that consistency does pay off. So we'll jump into photography and video. Your tools here are obviously cameras, editing applications, and skilled humans who know how to use those tools. Cameras, there's options now for all budgets. Even if it's just an investment in a phone with a good camera, everyone has access to incredible tools. And whether you are using a high-end camera or a camera phone, there's infinite ways to create visual impact for your brand. If you are going to invest in camera equipment, I would just say look for high quality yet affordable cameras with Wi-Fi capabilities. You don't need the nicest, highest end camera. You just need a good one that has Wi-Fi and that someone knows how to use. And again, if you want to talk cameras afterwards, we can, but I don't think that that's worth taking the time. Editing is a powerful tool for photos. Photo editing apps versus filters. I think it's important to take the time to look into and invest in some photo editing apps like Snapseed, Lightroom, Darkroom, things that don't require a ton of training but can drastically improve the overall visual and consistency of your brand. The thing with filters is that they're accessible to everyone and people recognize them as well, and so it can kind of come off amateurish and if you're just using filters every time. I'll always edit your photos. You should be reacting to every photo like it's the moment in time that it is. Each photo will need something different, whether it's an edit in light or saturation, and listen to what that visual needs to be its best. You've taken the time to capture the photo, take the time to edit it and make it the best it can be. So best practices for photography and video, invest in people who know how to use the tools. In the hands of the right people, camera phones and editing apps can be all you need. Photography is one of those skill sets that I think gets underrated because of the accessibility of camera phones and filters, but there's a vast difference when you invest in the ability of a human who, again, knows how to use those things appropriately well. That's what I just said. Subject matter matters. Identify what belongs on a personal social media platform and what belongs on a brand social media platform. And I think it's, again, on a social media, on your own personal social media platform, you're gonna see selfies, late night drinking photos, photos of restaurants that you've been to. That's not necessarily brand appropriate, or that's not necessarily what people who are tuned into you as a brewery want to see. So it's always important to just be asking yourself that, like, what is it? Is it just something that I personally like, or is it something that applies to the brand and the larger story and what we're doing? Stay inspired and put in the work. Be creative, play with backgrounds, ingredients, locations, and be prepared to work for the perfect shot. Nothing beats a good beer photo, but there's more out there in the world of photography, and so look around you, look to other brands to be inspired, and just give it a good effort. I think you'll find that it can be really enjoyable and not just something to check off your list. So events and festivals, these are generally your tools that you have as it applies to in-house events. Small repeating one-off events. There's incredible value in creating events with a regular rhythm, as well as events that are like moments in time and are there and gone. They both have their time and place. If you're doing repeating events, they should be interest-specific, dependable, meaning you do them every week, regardless of like if turnout is slow to begin with, and to some degree they should run on your own. It shouldn't be something that takes up the full time and attention of your events coordinator or someone on your staff. One-off events are a great chance to involve the small business community. For collaborations, pop-ups, you can lean into people around you to create one-off events and be inspired by other people. It's not always just up to you to come up with, cool one-off events and tap into what's there. I'm going to give a few examples of events just because it's helpful it's not enough to be like creating a unique event and to not know what that is. So, like True Brewing out in Denver, Colorado, they're a metal-themed brewery, and they do a game night, but it's a Dungeons and Dragons game night. So it's really plugged into like who they are and who their community is. And you can bring other games, but they do it consistently, and they have an amazing turnout of people who are just like super specific, and it brings out a certain type of people, but they love it, and it provides a space for people who probably wouldn't otherwise, have a space in a brewery to go. So that's a good example of something that's a repeating event that's unique. Let's talk about beer releases. So this can, depending on your brand, this can range from camping out in full-blown line culture to just like slightly busier taproom days. Either way, offer extra incentives, especially merch, early beers, coffee and donuts. Be prepared, be hospitable, and say what you mean and mean what you say. Meaning that, if you say you're going to start at 12 p.m., don't start a minute sooner, don't start a minute later. I've been blasted for both. It's really important that if you're going to take the time to ask people to come out, that you are consistent, and whatever the precedent is that you set or the way that you frame your beer release, like be about it and stick to it, so that at the end of the day, like if and when people aren't happy with how things went, you can at least say that like I did what I said I was going to do, and I made that public knowledge. It's probably the best thing you can do. And remember that it's optional. And this should incite both gratitude that people have come to your release when they could have picked probably countless others that day. And it should also remind you that whatever happens, it's going to be okay. It's not the DMV, and people can choose to be there, or they can choose to spend their day any other way. So don't take it too seriously, but also, be gracious that people are there. It can be, depending on your model, it can be a real tightrope, but I think if you can remember to be hospitable, you'd be all right. Holidays are another great opportunity. America has a drinking culture that comes out hard and furious during holidays. It gives you an ability to capture the regulars, out-of-towners, and people who may not even have been to a brewery before. So I would encourage you on those days to create an event that's unique to your brand and specific, so it gives people a really good idea of who you are, but also that should be an opportunity for you to shine in terms of hospitality and service and things that you do well all the time. And that can be really hard on a holiday because people are working on a holiday. But I think if you can, again, provide something that's unique, so people were like, I went to this brewery and I did this, and I didn't even know what a brewery was, or that this event existed, and walk away like feeling like they've been to something special that's super strong. Annual events and festivals, increasingly, you're seeing, breweries do. There's, I swear, like at least 2 to 3, national beer festivals every month. Around the calendar, but they're great because they create consumer anticipation, they create new traditions. It asks consumers to come out for something different, and it gives you a chance to like bring the beer industry out and show the rest of your local community like what this industry is about. The brewery run and hosted festivals, again, they're at an all-time high. For the most part, they're fantastic, well-run, and they're brewery-centric events, and they're super great. And if you have the time and the space to create one, I highly recommend that it's something you consider doing. Oh, well, it's just in the middle. Okay. Best practices for events and festivals. Again, create events that are unique and memorable. A good trivia nights, beer dinners, sports viewing Sundays, yoga classes. They're all great, but they're all a dime a dozen. And if every local brewery, even bars and restaurants are doing them, and you're probably never going to beat them on like pricing or specials. So if you can name, 3 or more breweries that are doing an event that you're thinking of, think of something else, or find a way to put a spin on it, like that Dungeons and Dragons, game night, or just ask people to come out for something that's slightly different than what the people around you are producing. Ask for help. Poorly run and organized events can be very damaging, and if you aren't certain how to best organize or run a beer release, event or festival, reach out to other breweries who are doing them well, or hire an events company who's has a history of successful events that match the scale you'd like to achieve. Be prepared for events and festivals to result in a marketing expense versus a moneymaker. For anyone who hasn't put on an annual festival, I honestly don't know anyone in the country currently who's coming out and being like, oh, we made a ton of money doing that national event. And there's also there's things like laws that are different for each state that you have to be involved with a nonprofit partner, which I think is great. There's legal fees, there's buying beer, there's brewer hospitality, which is very expensive. Y'all have expensive taste. And then ticket price thresholds that people aren't willing to spend more than a certain amount on an annual festival, even for the best in the country. There's a real threshold there, and all those things add up and often outweigh profits. I think that's fine. I think it's about gathering people, showing who you are, investing in the community around you, rewarding them for all their loyalty to you, and bringing all these cool breweries in. I think it's a super worthwhile investment. You should just be prepared for that to not make you a ton of money. Events are 10% creative and 90% organizational. It's obviously my own made-up statistic, but find the right people for the job. I think a lot of people going into events are like, it's super creative, and I love being creative, and most of it's spreadsheets and problem solving and organization and use. I would say that find those people who are really good at that, whether it's an events coordinator or people who are deadline oriented. Most of it's just execution, and I think that's kind of it's a myth that it's very creative. Cost, budget, and hiring. These are your tools, and then there's kind of topics that we're gonna breeze through really quickly. Paid advertising, it should be based on your specific situation and the needs that arise from that situation. So, a good example would be if your brewery is in a place that's hard to find and you're not getting good foot traffic, consider taking out a local ad that has a map. And again, that's not just general hey, we're here advertising. It's this is how to find us and this is how to get to us. So if you're gonna spend money on advertising, it should, as best you can determine, meet a specific need that your brewery has or be a reaction to a specific need. Sponsorships and buy-in festivals and events. A lot of feelings about these, but Ask for high value returns that you feel equal the cost of sponsorship or participation. I don't think that exposure is a good enough reason anymore for people to spend a ton of money to be in a place and to use staff and travel, and it's expensive to do those things and to be involved, and I just don't think exposure anymore is a good enough reason. So you should be looking for a return on your investment that offers you something you don't already have: education, resources. This is a great example of that. You've all paid to be here, and hopefully and ideally you're getting something that you didn't have beforehand. So if you're going to buy in, make sure you're getting something out of it that you don't currently already have. We're going to talk briefly about beer industry pay standards versus marketing industry pay standards. Marketing and sales are unique in the way that you can look to other industries to measure and to gauge. There's not really that for brewers unless you're going to look at the major breweries, but there's still not a ton of them. This discrepancy can range from $30,000 to $160,000 a year for the same titled position of marketing director. It's a massive discrepancy, and something that's worth you thinking about and weighing. I would say that the brewery size and goals, position workload, job responsibilities, and title are all helpful guidance in determining the appropriate pay scale for marketing employees. And then marketing employee versus contracted firm. I've lived both, and this is a whole other crash course, but ultimately you get what you pay for, and there are equal, again, pros and cons, but experience, knowledge, skill set, portfolio, and the ability to learn and adapt should be things that you're looking for and determine your path. Some marketing employee pros and cons: they have strong buy-in, they're long-term investment, they grow with the company, they have industry love and experience, which is super necessary for this job, but they do require time and relationship investment. Benefits, raises, and parting ways can be a long, difficult, and very painful process. What's that going to attest to? Interesting. But contracted firms, they bring experience, out of industry knowledge of marketing, strong public relations with a huge network, access to highly skilled network of artists, designers, photographers, people that it's hard to tap into if you're looking on your own. But they do have a steep learning curve for the beer industry. They have other clients, so they're not going to be spending their sole time on you, and sometimes the cost can, I think, border on profiteering for what certain marketing and PR companies want to ask. And again, it's because they're out of industry and they're working for multi-million-dollar companies, so there is a little bit of negotiation and flexibility that has to happen there. Best practices. Evaluate and prioritize your needs. Your marketing budget should always prioritize the sale of beer and the monetary success of your tap room. If you can sell all the beer that you're making and your tap room is successful, you can do all those other things. You can do annual events, you can do festivals, you can invest in those employees and staff that make your marketing team more robust, but that has to be the first thing. Understand what you're paying for. Invest in marketing, again, to meet a specific need and predict what outcomes or ask for specific outcomes that are measurable. This is probably the most important thing in terms of also the price discrepancy and what marketing people are paid in the beer industry specifically is to title marketing positions appropriately. Pay scale and responsibilities should always align with title, and title should be clearly defined. If you're a brewery who can only afford to pay a marketing employee $30,000 a year, that's a start, but that's not a marketing director. That person's not being compensated as a marketing director, and they probably, if they're accepting that salary, don't have the skill set of a marketing director. So call them a marketing manager or brand manager, or give them room to grow and something to look forward to. But mitigating those expectations are probably the best way to navigate that massive, how do we compensate marketing employees in the industry versus out of industry? And lastly, learn to view marketing positions like brewer positions. You look for the same qualifications, expect the same standards, and give the same respect. One doesn't exist without the other anymore. It's not enough just to make beer and be creative. It has to be sold and go somewhere. And these two jobs are interdependent, and mutual respect and understanding make them unstoppable together. It can be the strongest relationship you have in your brewery between the marketing and sales and your brewers, and you need to learn to value them both appropriately. That's my contact information for any follow-up questions. Thank you for listening, and good luck out there.
I've never seen anyone deliver like 55 slides in that amount of time, so that was amazing. Certainly a lot to take in, not only in that presentation, but all the presentations today. So hopefully you guys found this valuable. There were some nuggets that you're able to take back and apply to your businesses.